Hey everybody, welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution. This is Leilani. We are here. It is not Tuesday and it is not 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but that is okay. We are going to do this live anyway, but it's supposed to be our Tuesdays book club. All right, but the last two Tuesdays I just couldn't do it, unfortunately. Well, actually not unfortunately. Now that I've got an audience, so I'm in a little local band, super cute, little local band in my area, and we've been getting a lot more gigs, like a lot more gigs. And so band practice has been sort of eating up my Tuesday nights now. And I don't really have any other place to put the the book club time up, you know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where I'm back in that momentum of just doing it when I can. And so here we are. It is a Thursday. It is 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we are out here trying to read this book that is this thick that we're trying to get through, right? So, first and foremost, let me say hello to everyone here on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, Twitter, all the places, okay? All the places. I just want to welcome you guys, say hello. Thank you guys for stopping in. Make sure you comment, make sure you let me know where you're watching from. Now, why are we here? Book club is an opportunity for us to choose a spiritual text and dive into it together, read it out loud. Well, I read it out loud and I interject some of my ideas as I'm reading. But overall, it's an opportunity for you to listen to a book, get your brain fed, let you percolate on some ideas, let you have some dissonance going on, help you grow a little bit. And I started this little book club thing about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, because as someone who is neurodivergent, having someone read to me or doing audiobooks was also like super helpful in my development so that I can progress my way. And so I want to offer that to those who also might be suffering from those kinds of issues, and hopefully that this helps. Now, I'm not like a video person, so I don't have like these cool pop-ups and these cool little things to explain what it is that I do, but I'm sure you can get it, right? Hold on one second. I'm being distracted by like four things right now. Okay. So we are watching from all these places. Those of you guys who actually want to read along with me, so that means you guys on TikTok, if you guys want to read along with me and actually see the text on screen, I highly suggest you go to any of my other social medias, specifically YouTube and Facebook. That's where you'll see the best version of our book that we're going to be reading. So, speaking of our book, the book that we had chose was is entitled The Y'all, it's already starting. It's already starting. The Harmonial Philosophy. The Harmonial Philosophy, okay, which is a compendium, a compilation of all of the books of Andrew Jackson Davis, who is an American spiritualist from the 1800s, early 1900s, who lived in New York. And so this is sort of a compendium of all of his stuff, and it kind of gives you a good chunk of a little bit of everything, his cosmology, what his views are on spirits, what his views are on spiritual anatomy, what his views are on all kinds of shit, but like taken from pieces of his works. And then we also read the footnotes at the end of the chapter to sort of get the author's take on this, because we can't forget, like, this is still compiled to fit a specific narrative that best suited what Andrew Jackson Davis was trying to say at his time. But the author has really, really informative footnotes as well that really allows us an opportunity to see some counter thoughts, or to even see where Andrew Jackson Davis possibly learned about these ideas. Because let's not forget, Andrew Davis was, I wouldn't say an original thinker. He had a few nice ideas, but for the most part, he was someone who compiled information that was popping at the time. So we had things like mesmerism, we had things like naturalism, we had all these scientific things that were happening during this age of the 1800s, early 1900s, this sort of like mini age of enlightenment, this little mini renaissance, if you will, of education and spiritual thought and all that good stuff. He had a lot to pick from. He really did. Now, at the time, let's remember who he was, though. At the time, he claimed, and there is evidence that, he had a very limited education. He also claimed really not to be a medium. So, in denying all of these things, is what sort of made work kind of quote unquote exceptional. It's because for someone who has limited education and for someone who doesn't claim to have connection to spirit like that, he really has a lot of gnosis, and he has a lot of very current framework of thought that really, really informed his writings. So, before I drown your ear out about that, let us share screen. Okay. So that you can see what is happening right now? Why isn't this working? There we go. Beautiful. So let's open this up. Can you guys give me a thumbs up that you can see that on the screen? Okay. And I'm also going to zoom in a little bit more as well so that we can really get a good view of the words. Okay, here we go. So right now we are on chapter 9. Now, before we move forward, I need you to understand something. Number one, if this is the first time you're coming to one of our book clubs, then please know that you do not need to have any prerequisites. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment because I need to. I don't know why this isn't working here. Sorry for all that, you guys. I had a really rough start. So let me. Okay. Okay. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So I apologize. Let me go back to sharing screen. Boom. Okay, so let me get back to what I was saying. If you guys are joining us for the first time, please don't worry about whether or not are all caught up on all the previous chapters. Again, we read together, I interject. There really isn't anything you need to know or be privy to in order to kind of understand. The whole point is for it to be explained sort of like in a layman's terms, you know what I mean? All right, so let's get to it. The Spirit of Man, chapter 9. So the first cause of all things is spirit. And it is also, and this is also which is the ultimate in man. Okay, so please, this first line I think is very crucial. So spirit, okay, is the ultimate in man. Okay, I think that's a really important phrase. Matter and motion establish the existence of a first cause, while the truth that man is a spirit is proved not only by the law of progression and association, but by the science of correspondences, in the light of which all sciences should be understood. Okay? It is by correspondential investigation that, that we are led to the universal relation between truths. The universal motion in nature involves progression, and the whole evolution of the cosmos disposes thereto. So, also the universal association in animate and inanimate things bears witness to a corresponding law in the unseen and the future. The truths which are seen are evidence of unseen truths. In the process of natural development, every substance enters into the composition of vegetable and animal forms and is individualized by man. Did everyone get that? Did everyone get that? Okay, good. All right, so then this piece here. Okay, so by such individualization, it becomes the future and corresponding principle. Spirit representing, in a second condition, the instrument of its individualization. Matter contains the properties to produce man as a progressive ultimate, and motion contains the properties to produce life and sensation. These together, and perfectly organized, develop the principle of spirit. Not as a result of organization, but of a combination of all elements and properties of which the organization is composed, the latter serving merely as an instrument. The principle of spirit existed eternally, emanating from the fountain of intelligence, but it could not be individualized and made manifest without a vessel like unto man. Okay. So there's something to be noted here, because I know when the last time that we were together and we were reading about the spirit, he was speaking a lot from terms that are very, human centric, right? And that's sort of like man is the peak of all things, right? That sort of mindset can lead to very ableist sort of ideas, right? And so when we were going through that chapter, it was easy to believe that Andrew Jackson Davis may also be referring to a perfect human vessel, right? But here in this chapter, which is the next chapter over, he is discussing how these things in perfect organization really have nothing to do with the organization of the vessel itself, but the combination of the elements and properties that it is composed of. Okay. And remember, those organizations, the organization of elements and those elements and properties that he's talking about, we talked about them in the first couple of chapters when he was talking about, what do you call it? Wisdom, um, oh my god, I'm going brain dead right now. Wisdom, kindness, like he was going through all these various elements that we are aiming towards and progressing towards, and whose experiences from the, vegetable, mineral, animal conditions, the lessons in those conditions have allowed us to create vessels for ourselves to that housed that potentiality, right? And so the vessel itself, it could be disabled, it could be broken, it could be imperfect, you could be whatever, but within that vessel holds that potentiality of divinity. And so the expression of that divinity will be what's important, right? The expression of that in its spiritual combination is what's important, not the combination of the physical body. So this chapter helps us to really remove some of the hatred that we were feeling in that last chapter. Remember? Like, we were feeling it. We were like, what the fuck is this dude saying? Like, that's not right. But now he's talking about how that's not what it's meant. He's talking about the internal spirit, and the perfection of that is what matters. To analyze the principle itself would demand self-comprehension, which is beyond our scope, so long as research depends on material organization. In a more exalted sphere, we shall be in a position to understand the composite existence of this world below. Did the human embryo possess intelligence, it would require as much argument to prove its coming into existence on the plane of earth as we demand now to convince us of future identity and existence in the spirit. The embryo would not attain perfect physical being, wanting the proper vehicle for development. And it is the same also with the spirit. The perfect development of the child within the body of its mother is the first epoch of physical existence, and in correspondence therewith is the first of spiritual life. From childhood to youth, from youth to manhood, and thence to old age are rather epochs through which passes our bodily life, and characteristics of these are successive stages of knowledge and experience, involving an accumulation of intellectual properties belonging to each individual. All these correspond to spiritual progression. As the former are developed in the physical form, so unfolds in visibility the principle of spiritual life. As the human embryo contains an essential principle which produces the perfect organization of man, so is there a corresponding essence which produces spirit as its result. The end, as already indicated, is that spirit should be individualized to establish communion and sympathy between the creator and the thing created. The spirit progresses to the source from whence it came, and so only is fitted for new spheres of external existence. The cause of all things must produce ultimate corresponding with its own nature. If the first cause be perfect, so must be the end also. If the first essence be progressive in its nature, so must also the ultimate. If the primal fountain of if the primal fountain be supreme intelligence, it must produce intelligence as a result. If the beginning be divinely pure, so must the end be also. If the first be eternal, so must be the final end. If the intelligent organizer of universal nature contain within himself all perfection of beauty and intelligence beyond the comprehension of finite beings, must not that ultimate which is the spirit of man be in necessary harmony therewith, in specific essences and qualities? As offspring of the Great Father, must it not be pure and divine? If these things be so, then spirit, individualized through the instrumentality of nature and man, shall become like the primitive essence from which it derives, bearing the impress and containing the properties of its source. It is from that which the first was and will be, at which the first is. Mm, wild. That is juicy. That is beautiful. Tell me what you guys think about it. So I hope you're understanding what is being said here. So what's being said here is that it only makes sense for the nature of mankind, for the nature of all things created, to be a nature of progression, because the end source is that of infinite growth, right? So progression is the law, right? But then there's this other piece too, right? Like there are other sort of qualities we kind of attribute to divinity, right? Despite divinity being something that is completely outside of our true understanding, we still attribute certain qualities, things like omnipresence, omnipotence, all these eternities and this and that, right? All these things to express just how unknowable this force is. But at the same time, when we place those qualities upon what we see as divinity, we are essentially placing qualities on what we are progressing towards. I'll let that sink. I'll let that sink. Yeah. Okay. So what that means is, if we see God as good, our nature is to progress towards good. If we see God as love, our nature is to progress towards love, because God is the first cause and God is the last cause, right? There's this whole like omega and alpha omega thing that we like to do, right? The figure eight, the snake eating its own tail, all those fun little symbols, those, right? So essentially, what we're saying is the laws of nature are written in nature. Divine laws are written. You can see them, you can experience them, you know them. There are such things as divine truths. Don't let a motherfucker tell you otherwise. There are divine truths, and these divine truths can be found in all spiritual practices, no matter how fucking far off the beaten path they ended up going with their mythologies and their stories and their politics and whatevers. But at the core of what these mystics, these spiritualists, these animists, these pantheists, these pagans of the past, if you will, all of them said the same shit. And these laws, it takes what? It takes this dude, it takes this guy, Andrew Jackson Davis in the 1800s, early 1900s to collect the information, put it all together for you and say here. It took that for you guys to like no, sometimes we just got to look around. One of the good things, you know what I love about being a Virgo? You know what I love about being a Virgo? Our ability to observe and pattern recognize and see bullshit from a mile away is unparalleled. Nobody can do it the way us Virgos do it. We can read a motherfucker to filth by spending 2 seconds with them. We'll tell you about your mama, your grandmama, your upbringing, all of it. We'll tell you about all of it just hanging out with you for 2 seconds because our power of observation and our power of intuition is crazy. You know what I'm saying? And here goes my ADHD off the topic rant. I love being a Virgo, you guys. Virgo season. Water break. Sorry about that. All right, let's get back to it. Ready? So matter and spirit have been regarded heretofore as distinct and independent substances. Okay. But instead of this total disconnection, the object of the foregoing remarks is to prove by acknowledged laws and principles of matter the mode which nature follows in the development of intelligence and perfection, of which is spirit. So again, if spirit is divine intelligence, you therefore too are striving to progress towards divine intelligence. The end goal is there. It's right there because you placed it there. And you will have no choice but to become that, because that is how we move. That's how nature works, right? Or at least that's how the spirit works. Let's remove that, right? Because although they reflect each other, nature too has its own laws. Now, mind you, the spiritual stuff will always trump and will always be the driving ashe, the driving force, the driving chi behind the movements of nature. But nonetheless, nature still has its own laws. Nature still has its own, because it now has restrictions. It now has limitations. Nature is limited, spirit is not. And those limitations are the laws in which nature must abide by, and all things in nature must abide by. Otherwise, it ceases to exist. Whereas spirit is eternal, right? So this is sort of what we're trying to get at here. It is further to trace the operations of life, movement, and sensation from the great positive mind through all intermediate things up to man, to show that in him the eternal principle of spiritual nature becomes individualized, the first working through physical nature, as a second to produce spirit, as a third and grand result. The germ of the immortal nature is spiritual, and is detached from deific ocean of spirit when the human fetus is within 12 weeks of birth. Every stage below or prior to that crisis represents the great animal department. Ooh, so he makes a bold ass claim here, you guys. Mr. Andrew Jackson Davis makes a bold claim here. So his claim is that spirit separates from the cosmic ocean to become imbued in nature, specifically in man, at the 12th week mark of germination, right? So when you're 12 weeks pregnant, you now have quote unquote spirit within you. Anything prior to those 12 weeks, all the way up to the the thought of this the thought of this creation manifesting in the cosmic ocean in the first place. Everything in between the thought and those 12 weeks are considered part of the lower kingdoms. Okay? And what they mean about the lower kingdoms, for those who were not here in the previous chapters, is the the mineral, vegetable, animal kingdoms, right? All the kingdoms that we had to pass through in order to get to the human, to the Homo sapien, you know what I'm saying, department. And all those lower departments are not bad. They're not, they were departments in that fortified and gave our spirit lessons and nurtured our physical bodies and purified our spiritual bodies through moving through these chapters. So now that we are at this quote unquote human chapter, this is where Andrew Jackson Davis says we've kind of reached sort of the point of nature. Like we're done in terms of the progression of the physicalness of ourselves. The rest is just going to be what we call evolution based on our environment. Okay, like it are the drives to change our physical body because of spirit. We no longer need to worry about that, is what is being said in these chapters. That instead, any changes that happen to the physical body are going to be changes that are environmental, that are about, how you're raised, where you're raised, what's happening to you. Are you at the equator, blah blah blah, right? Whereas the other piece of us, because we've hit the peak of this natural perfection, according to him, because we've hit there, we now have that added responsibility to dive deep into our consciousness, because that is the space of the next frontier, right? And this frontier of consciousness, y'all, has been going on for a couple thousand years. I really need, before I even continue reading, I really need y'all to know this. Like, these little new age little things that people talking doing cars, this is not this. I promise you, no thought have you had was not thought before. I promise. There's no originality to what anybody is saying these days, because this frontier of consciousness has been going on for thousands of years. It's why we fucking figured out how to harness fire. It is why we built the pyramids. It is why we can fly. This has been going on for a minute. You know what I'm saying? But the key now, what we're seeing here in the year 2024, which is why I love to read these spiritual texts and also kind of bring them into the present. So remember, this was written like the late 1800s, early 1900s, right? So what's interesting now is this sort of fight to return back, not necessarily to the nature of consciousness, but to the spirit nature of consciousness. And so the next frontier that we're kind of facing here is this sort of um the spirit consciousness that unfortunately very few people have the luxury to engage in, because it's an actual engagement. You have to put the engagement of the consciousness that we're talking about in the early 1800s, early 1900s. That engagement had more to do with scholarly engagement, had more to do with machinery and technology and scientific inventions, right? Is the age of intellectualism, right? That's a different type of consciousness. That was their frontier when this book was being talked about, right? Our frontier is a spiritual type of consciousness. So bringing this information to where we are now, I think, is really important to discuss, because he's dropping some truths here. He's dropping a lot of truths here. We just gotta sift through. We gotta sift through because we can't forget when it was written, who it was written by. Like, can't throw the baby out with the dirty ass bathwater. You just can't do it. There's some gems in here. Okay. All right, so let's do it. Let's do it. And look at me, I went off on a rant again, and we were talking about his bold claim of how spirit goes into babies at 12 weeks. You see how okay, anyway, moving on. The universal divine procreative force first organizes the body by means of governing or fashioning principle within the maternal nature. The grand use of the body is in gathering nervous forces and vital currents, molding them into its own image and likeness. Woo! Do you see that? Do you see that sentence? The grand use of the body, pause, is in gathering nervous forces and vital currents, molding them into its own image and likeness, right? So the nervous system and the spiritual fluids, your spine, your brain, and the spinal fluid. You're welcome. That's esoteric knowledge that everyone is talking about, but that, again, nothing new, right? Nothing new. Oh, no phone calls. Sorry, guy. Okay. The ultimate result is the soul, philosophically speaking. It is an organized silver lining to the outer form and serves after death as a beautiful body for the clothing of the golden spirit, which is still more interior and incapable of organization. So, that little sentence here, for those of you who have not been with us for the previous chapters, when he talks about the golden spirit, he's talking about the soul flame, that little silent observer that is in all of us, right? The one drop of the giant ocean, the cosmic ocean, that kind of thing. He's talking about how this golden spirit is incapable of organization because that's not its role. Its role is just to observe, to be the God energy, that force that watches and experiences everything through you, right? But that the spirit, again, like we mentioned, is the next frontier. The spirit consciousness is the next frontier, and it's about purifying that spirit consciousness, getting that spirit consciousness to strive and progress towards those things that we had listed, right? So good, love, intelligence, all the things that we think God is. God is eternal, everlasting, this, all those things. Because we gave those attributes to God, we are progressing towards that because that is the end result, right? And to get the spirit to progress towards that is how it is purified. Now, the human soul cannot be organized perfectly without the two physical brains, and the impersonal spirit of the infinite cannot be embodied unless the soul pre-exists, serving both as a magnet and a matrix. I'm going to just read it again. I'm going to read it again because I still need to process it. Ready? The human soul cannot be organized perfectly without the two physical brains, and the impersonal spirit of the infinite cannot be embodied unless the soul pre-exists, serving both as a magnet and a matrix. You know what? I'm going to just go down to the footnote. What is he saying here with this footnote? It says, because what? It says, the previous section affirms that the soul or physical body is manufactured gradually through the body of this world, and it does not therefore pre-exist. But if pre-existence is necessary, the spirit does not enter humanity, at least fully, until after death. It is to be noted that an earlier volume of the Great Harmonia, which is one of the books that he pulls this from, identifies the soul and spirit not less expressly than in his other book, The Principles of Nature. The alternative view seems to have been presented suddenly to the mind of Davis, and also to have left him suddenly, for it scarcely recurs subsequently until the tripartite nature of man is discussed in several places in his book or in his lectures, Answers to Ever Reoccurring Questions. Okay, so the author acknowledges here that sort of his view of the soul is very contradictory. His view of the soul is very contradictory because, and it's true, because he uses the word soul and spirit interchangeably, and because he gives the soul a lot of like pet names like golden spirit and this and that. He gives the soul a lot of pet names, and so because of that it can be oftentimes very confusing. But apparently that he flip-flops between the soul pre-existing at one point, but also saying that it doesn't pre-exist, that it's always there. And so that it, I'm sorry, not that it's always there, that it comes into manifestation upon the 12-week mark. And so, the author who compiled these texts are just kind of throwing that into question, like, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, let's keep it moving. It follows that there is a period in the fetal formation and development when the spirit enters upon its individual existence. It is at our very near, it is at our, ugh, it is at or very near the close of the 7th month that the immortal part lifts up the unborn infant's mortality far above the animal kingdom. Interesting. Interesting what he says here. Okay. Okay. So he says that the soul enters the body at the 12-week mark. And a soul, according to this, tradition, a soul is something that everything that's living has. Everything that's living has a soul. But a spirit is something that not everything has, except for humans. Okay? And so he's saying here that at the 12-week mark, we get a soul, but at the 7th month mark, right, is when the soul sort of uplifts the spirit, uplifts the spirit of this animal from the animal realms to now the human realm. Okay? So it's the soul that is responsible for that upliftment into this infant at the 7th month mark. Okay? Interesting. Very interesting. So the law of human birth has 3 stages as follows: deposition of the positive germ or masculine form of spiritual essence as they exist in nature below man; reaction of the negative spiritual forces on the feminine side, thus completing the cycle of the circle in the formation of the spiritual body and precipitating the physical body by the operation of natural birth; deposition and unfoldment of the spirit germ from this dual vitalic oneness. In other words, the positive side of the spiritual organization with its physical vesture acts on the negative side of the spiritual organization with its physical vesture, thus dispositing and unfolding the spirit germ in the soul substance, and the negative side reacting unfolds the organized individual spirit, which is indestructible both in essence and in form, as there is a point where minerals cease to be minerals and become vegetable, and another crisis when the vegetable merges into the animal. So is there a critical juncture in the fetal development of the human brain when that receptacle is capable of attracting and detaching a portion of the omnipresent principle of God and of contrating it to the germ state to unfold the immortal personality. Woo! Wow, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. So that is a whole thing, you guys. I'm gonna scroll back just a little bit. So start right here, in other words, and go all the way down to the end of this chapter. Okay, I'm to the end of this page. I'm sorry, the end of this. Aki, fuck. I'm gonna just do it for you. Fuck, right here. Okay. So take that, screenshot it because it's really good. It's really interesting, and just sit with that. Apparently, this is when this is when spirit and soul kind of make the choice, right? They make the choice. This is it. This is what we're doing, you know? And it invites sort of this omnipresent God essence into the space, right? It's when the natural spirit, the natural consciousness opens up to the spirit consciousness. There's a germation within a germation. That's kind of crazy. That's kind of wild. All right. Material, or so-called imponderable elements, when perfectly attenuated and etherealized, become exquisitely volatile and forthwith begin to rise out of all visible substances. These elements form that part of man's mentality which is termed very truly the spiritual body, or dress of the most interior and absolutely perfect essence, the spirit itself. This is so cool. This is so cool. I mean, we're literally talking about the birth of the spirit from when the soul enters the fetus to when the soul and the physical body sort of create this sort of secondary germination that births the spirit body that will then be sort of the intermediary, if you will, and the thing that does all of the spiritual progressing. We're watching the philosophy of how this science happens, the metaphysics of how this birth of the spirit happens. This is so fucking dope. I might do a video on this tomorrow. Too dope. Anyway, the innermost of man is therefore a self intelligent and incoherent emanation of eternal elements or ideas from the universal ocean of divine love and divine wisdom. The first is feminine and the second is masculine, and the two form in man, as they do everywhere, a perfect union. This unity is indissoluble and perfect, like the ingredients of which it is composed. In the progress of time, therefore, man himself may become perfect, even as our Father who is in heaven, that is, he may become spiritual, free, and consciously true to the innermost and uppermost of his being, no longer physical in the sense of material abandonment, nor devoted, as some are, to the gratification of those avarices, wants, which take their rise and multiply in the nerve soul between the bodily organization and the central spirit essence. It should be understood that temperament is phenomenal, and of those etherealized elements which enter into and elaborate the spirit's body, being the nerve soul just mentioned. The physical body is elaborated, individualized, and sustained by the intermediate spiritual organization. Woo! Beautiful. That whole section, I 1000% agree with. I'm going to take another water break. Mm. Yeah, man, that whole thing, I'm 100% for. I'm 100% for. That's exactly how I explain it to my mentees. Each works for and upon the other until the innermost is perfectly individualized and separated from the universal ocean of divine essences. Then the nerve soul takes the reins of government. controls heart and brain, the blood, and the neuromuscular systems, retaining this distinction and mastery for years or centuries, or until the divine spirit essence is permitted to ascend the throne and rule over the kingdom of heaven, which is within us. But amidst these terms and philosophical discriminations, let it be remembered always that man's spirit per se is an unparticled, indivisible, self attractive, intermagnetic, perfect, unprogressive essence, a treasury of ideas, a lake separated from the universal ocean of interintelligent principles. Be it also kept vividly in mind as a rule of faith and practice all through this world that although men differ widely and antagonize extensively in the realm of phenomenon, there is in the deepest of each a fraternal or like essence, by virtue of which all strangers will one day become friends, all enemies, eventual lovers, all slaves, the peers of masters, all wanderers, inmates of one home world, beyond the clouds and beyond the tomb. Woof! This chapter was dope. I love it. Oh my God. Oh my God. That chapter was insane. Insane. So now the forum is open for questions. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm not gonna read the footnotes tonight because we've already went way over time. But I will start with the footnotes in the next one so that way we can kind of also have a little bit of a refresher regarding this chapter. But wow, 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 wow. So if you have any questions, drop them now, or if you want to talk a little bit about um, the book that we are reading, or just the subjects of spiritualism, spiritism, espiritismo, the floor is yours. And I will take another water break. Mm. Okay, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay. Hello, hello. All right, awesome. Well, if you guys don't have any questions, that is totally okay. If you come up with questions later on, just drop them in the comments. I'll be more than happy to answer them. But as far as giving you a schedule for the next book club, I can't do that right now, y'all. I can't do it. The band is doing too well. Band practices every Tuesday night now. And so I can't promise you Tuesday nights no more. And I do way, 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 way too much to give any more time to anything else at the moment. Plus, it's spooky season, you guys. And you know how that is for us. Spooky season is a very busy time of year for us. This is where most of us make all of our money as well. For those of you who are in the business of selling products and services, so that's where my head is at currently. But I will not forget about you guys. The minute I say to myself, oh, I have an hour, but I have all this energy and I can't really just relax, I will jump on and make sure we squeeze in a book club. Okay? Well, I got to go get ready to teach a class. For those of you guys who did not know, I am ending the summer semester with my previous students for my spiritual development intensive course. This is going to be our last official class before they will be ready to attend one of our misas. And I'm really excited for them. I'm happy for them. But that also means that next semester is going to be rolling around the corner. And for next semester, we're doing things really different. We're doing things to be much more inclusive, much more interconnected, much more mindful of the language, much more mindful of the just the overall information, because science is constantly coming out with new shit and keeping up. They're finally starting to prove and keep up with a lot of the spiritual things that we've been saying for a very, very long time. A lot of the spiritual gnosis, the spiritual truths that many of us have known, either through your own personal gnosis and journey with spirit or through any specific traditions that you work with. And so it's nice to see these scientific breakthroughs, mechanical breakthroughs, tech breakthroughs, etc. And so all of that is also going to be brought into the class, as well as much more personal experiences and case studies that I want to offer the class. I tend to keep my classes very business, right? Like my classes are like going to a college lecture. Okay. Like when you're there, you should have a notebook. You should have done the homework from the night before. You should be prepared to speak or say something or participate in some way, even if that means just typing in the chat room because you might be, you know, not in a situation where you can talk out loud. But either way, these classes are very intense. They have a lot of expectation. But the cool part about these classes is that they push students and make students better. And as long as you follow what is being instructed of you, you will see your growth by the end of the semester. And it's just a really cool thing to witness, to observe. I've been a teacher now for almost 20 years, a little over 17 years. And I have been, very much in the mental health field a little over 20 years. And so watching people progress, watching people learn, watching people grow is just near and dear to the heart. And that's something that I want to make sure I always include in whatever it is that I do for you guys. So, since there are no questions, I'm going to end it. But feel free to reach out to me. Make sure you like, comment. If you like my content, share my content. If you've ever received services from me, or if you just have something nice to say, please send a review over to my Google page. It would be greatly appreciated. And that's it. I am done. Have a good night, everybody. Bye-bye. Let's see what we got here.